and welcome to Fox News at Night. I'm Shannon Bream in Washington. It is the most detailed accusation yet against GOP Senate candidate Roy Moore. An Alabama woman going on the record with high-profile attorney Gloria Allred at her side, describing a horrifying ordeal with Moore. Beverly Nelson says about 40 years ago when she was 16 and Moore was a 30-something district attorney, Moore assaulted her. The judge late today emphatically denied the claim, just as he has about the other accusations made by 4 other women. But top Senate Republicans say they've heard enough and they want Moore out of the race. Fox News chief national correspondent Ed Henry joins us now with the latest details. Good evening, Ed.
Shannon, a lot going on tonight. Roy Moore not just refusing to back down, he's actually trying to use these new accusers and the attacks from the establishment to help him politically. Moore tweeting, the person who should step aside is at Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell. He has failed conservatives and must be replaced. Hashtag drain the swamp. That comes as McConnell appeared in his home state today and ratcheted up the pressure on the candidate he tried to block in the GOP primary in the first place. While the Senate leader initially said Moore should get out if the allegations are true, he changed that today to say flat out Moore should get out because McConnell, quote, believes the women, as in multiple accusers that, as you say, have now reached 5. As attorney Gloria Allred held a news conference in New York to unveil Beverly Nelson, who charged that Moore groped her when she was just 16. Allred said Nelson is prepared to testify under oath and brought as evidence of a relationship, yes, a high school yearbook, that she says was signed by Moore when he was a prosecutor in his 30s.
Him putting his hands on my breast. I tried to open my car door to leave, but he reached over and he locked it so I could not get out. At some point he gave up. And he then looked at me and he told me, he said, you're just a child. And he said, I am the district attorney of Etowah County. And if you tell anyone about this, no one will ever believe you.
And I can tell you without hesitation, this is absolutely false. I never did what she said I did. I don't even know the woman. I don't know anything about her.
Now, Moore's not just calling for McConnell to step down. He vowed at a campaign event to sue the Washington Post, which broke the original story, trying to make a last stand here by suggesting all of these forces in Washington, from the liberal Washington Post to the conservative McConnell, are out to get him, Shannon.
All right, so Ed, more senators now speaking out tonight. There's a new twist, though, it sounds like.
Yeah, it's the Republican senators here in Washington not just saying he should step aside. They're now saying if he wins, he should be expelled from the Senate so that he's never even seated, which tells us a couple of things. First of all, party leaders think he can actually win this race, despite all the allegations. Then GOP leaders would try to knock Moore out and have the governor appoint someone safer, like, say, Attorney General Jeff Sessions. His name popped up today, though Justice Department officials quickly insisted he's not interested in his old Senate seat. First, though, Republicans like John McCain say they want Senate leaders to use Article 1 of the Constitution or any other lever they can find to stop Moore from taking his seat.
First of all, we got to find out whether the people of Alabama choose him or not. Then you explore the various options. So there are a number of options that are being considered, but he should not be a United States Senator.
But again, establishment figures like McCain coming out even harder against Moore. That may only help him with his base, guarantee that he has a shot at winning this seat in early December, the December 12th special election. Then after that, all bets are off, Shannon.
Yeah, as you saw, some people dug in and said that this is a hit job, which is his contention. We'll talk more about that coming up. Thank you very much, Ed. Good to see you. Now, despite all the controversy, Judge Moore's name will be on that Alabama ballot in the December 12th special election. And as our next guest facing all kinds of questions, Alabama Secretary of State John Merrill joins us now. Mr. Secretary, good to see you tonight.
Hello, Shannon. Great to see you.
Okay, so my understanding is there's no conversation about his name coming off the ballot. Any deadline for that would have passed. Is there any scenario in which he could withdraw his candidacy?
Well, certainly, Judge Moore could suspend his campaign. Judge Moore could disqualify himself and say that he's no longer an active candidate and that he wishes to formally let our office know that he does not want to continue the campaign. If he does that, then at that point we will duly note that, and that will be considered whenever the votes are cast on December the 12th. Likewise, Shannon, there's also a move that could take place by the state Republican Party where they could disassociate themselves from Judge Moore and his candidacy and indicate that he is no longer their nominee. That has to be done in a formal way. It would also indicate to us at that point in time that he would no longer be their representative, even though his name would still be on the ballot.
Okay, so under either one of those scenarios, if he still went on to win because his name's on the ballot, what happens then?
Well, if he receives the most votes in that situation, considering that he either withdraws himself or that he is no longer backed by the Republican Party in a formal way, at that point, if he still receives the most votes, our election would be declared null and void, and Governor Ivey would have to call another special election, and we'd start the process all over again.
Okay, that probably sounds daunting to you and other state officials there who are looking at a December 12th election, and a lot could happen between now and then. Okay, so you mentioned the governor. I've heard a lot of questions about whether or not Governor Ivey could reschedule this election, whether once the results are in, she could change the certification, delay it. Is there a specific time schedule where if Judge Moore wins that she would have to certify these results so that he could be seated here?
Well, we certify the election a week after the election is over. There are canvassing board members, of which Governor Ivey is one, I'm one, the Attorney General's office two, and we always meet, we go over the results, and then we certify the election after it takes place. I would be very surprised. It would be unprecedented in the history of the state for that to occur after the results of the people were made known. It would be very unusual. Now, the governor has already changed the election date one time. As you will recall, the original election date was set back to be held in June of 2018. However, Governor Ivey issued an additional proclamation when she became governor that changed the process. However, that was not done once the process had begun. We've already had a primary, we've had a runoff, now we're 29 days from the general election, and since October the 18th, we've had hundreds of citizens from Alabama already cast their ballot for Judge Moore or for Doug Jones in this general election scheduled for December 12th.
All right, let me ask you about another scenario that's getting floated around here in Washington and maybe there in Alabama as well. What if the current senator, Luther Strange, who lost in the GOP primary, decided to step down now before the special election, leaving that seat open? Would the governor then be able to appoint someone? Would that move the special election? What would happen?
Well, the governor would certainly have to appoint someone to fill that term that Senator Strange is currently completing. Of course, the way that our code reads is that the individual who is in that role would continue to serve until at such a time that the senator was duly elected and duly sworn in to fulfill the commitment as the junior senator from the state of Alabama. So in the instance that you just described, Senator Strange would no longer be in the picture. However, that individual who was in that role would continue until this election was completed and certified.
I bet you never imagined you'd have to answer all these questions, but thank you, Secretary Merrill, for giving us all the facts, because there is a lot of fiction out there along with those. Good to see you tonight.
Thank you, Shannon. Thank you so much.
All right, some Republicans say they're taking the claims against Moore so seriously because of what happened decades ago, when Democrats refused to listen to the women who said they were victimized by President Bill Clinton. Juanita Broderick says the former president raped her in 1978. She appeared on the Ingram Angle earlier tonight to talk about why she believes she was treated so differently years ago than those now alleging they were assaulted by Moore.
All victims matter. It doesn't matter if you're a Democrat or a Republican, or if you're who cares? Or if you're straight, or if you're gay, or if you believe in God or not. We all have the right to be believed.
So where does the debate go from here? Let's talk with Fox News politics editor Chris Steyerwald about GOP plans to, they say, make sure that Moore is persona non grata on Capitol Hill if he actually gets elected. So many different scenarios, Chris.
I was really just struck by something your guest said about Alabama state law. I did not know that if the Republicans essentially vacate Moore and file official notice with the state and say he is no longer our guy, if he wins, then the election result is voided. They have to have a new election. That means this is the jackpot that Republicans might be looking for, which is they can say, we disavow Moore, he is not our guy. guy, and then say, vote for Roy.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a scenario that could happen. And the secretary there, I saw him talking about this earlier today. The fact that, yes, if Roy Moore himself or the party withdraws him, but his name's still going to be on the ballot and he wins, he doesn't win. And so it's null and void and they got to start over.
Super glad I stayed up late. Now I know this. This is very good.
I'm glad you stayed up late, too. By the way, we had a response from his camp today, from his campaign after the latest round of allegations saying, we've said this before, we'll say it again. Judge Moore is an innocent man. This is a witch hunt against a man who had an impeccable career. We will pursue all legal options against these false claims, and Judge Moore will be vindicated.
So I think that Roy Moore is a child of Bill Clinton. And I think a lot of American politics are children of Bill Clinton because of this. Ken Starr, the man who prosecuted Bill Clinton, and many Republicans, many Americans, many Democrats believe that Bill Clinton would do as Richard Nixon had done and resign rather than face the ignominy of an impeachment, especially on a humiliating topic like that, and that decency and decorum would cause him to act. I saw, I believe it was Matt Iglesias from Vox, liberal publication. He said something I think was quite right on Twitter. He said, imagine how different our public discourse would be today if Bill Clinton had resigned. And now, and there was a smart piece in the Atlantic just out that was, again, not Breitbart. This is a liberal publication, and it said this: the reckoning for Bill Clinton is coming. If what Bill Clinton did in the time that he was doing it, regardless of whether he accepts or denies the claims from Broderick and others, if that happened in the current climate, can you imagine the way that Bill Clinton would be treated, even for the things that he admitted doing? The world has changed a lot since then. But part of the reason that politics is as gross as it is today was based on the decision that the Clintons made to destroy the accusers and brazen everything out with absolute total shamelessness.
That's true. And you mentioned, we talked earlier today about Chris Hayes, who's an anchor on another network. And he even said this, too, not a conservative guy. He says, as gross and cynical and hypocritical as the right's "what about Bill Clinton" stuff is, it's also true that Democrats and the center left are overdue for a real reckoning with the allegations against him. Now, let's hear from someone else who is involved in this whole situation. That's Steve Bannon, who was the one who encouraged voters to go for Roy Moore. Here is what he has to say today.
Why don't we get the Republican Party to back off? Okay? Where's the leadership of Mitch McConnell and where's the leadership of Paul? You know what it is? It's just like Billy Bush weekend. It's just like this thing down there with Judge Moore. It's just like on this. They're petrified of the opposition party. You know what my superpower is? I don't give a damn. I could care less what they say about me. I could care less. It's about action.
You know what? I think you might have that same special superpower.
No, I care deeply. I care deeply what you think about me.
Well, maybe me.
Well, yes, I would definitely keep that. Look, Steve Bannon better hope that this comes to some salubrious end for the Republicans, because he's trying to repeat this across the country. His abilities as a candidate picker are sort of on the line here. And if this meltdown continues and Moore either doesn't step aside or there is not some solution and this seat ends up as a Democratic win, this will cast considerable doubt on the idea of a savage bloodletting revolution. That you say, how are we going to expand our majority in the Senate? First, by savagely attacking one another. That is how Republicans will advance. It was a dubious proposition to begin with, and this will be Exhibit A for Mitch McConnell, that he will say, oh, you want to have vicious primaries in every state and end up with questionable nominees?
Well, you remember a couple of weeks ago, I interviewed him before this whole Roy Moore thing broke. He wouldn't even say Steve Bannon's name. He said the individual that you mentioned. But he said, listen, they don't have a great track record for them. And he pointed to that, and he may be vindicated here. But at what expense, potentially for his own party in the Senate? And
the country having another bad week, talking about unhappy, gross things.
Having to cover the kids' ears.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, Chris, good to see you.
Good to see you,
Happy Monday. All right, we are learning tonight. President Trump's son, Don Jr., communicated with WikiLeaks at the height of his father's presidential campaign, and that communication continued into the summer. The Atlantic reports that WikiLeaks privately messaged Trump Jr. on Twitter, asking the president's son for his cooperation in sharing its work in contesting the results of the election. And after Trump's election, helping Julian Assange to be Australia's ambassador to the U.S. The messages were given to congressional investigators, and lawmakers are already weighing in.
The president's son would be in direct communication with the vehicle that was used by Russia in order to seek to influence our election as a really striking development.
Do you think that means that flies in the face of what was said in Asia by the president?
It's certainly close coordination.
Again, that material's already been turned over, so Trump Jr. put all the material online late today, and he tweeted the entire chain of messages with @WikiLeaks with my whopping 3 responses. Which one of the congressional committees has chosen to selectively leak? How ironic. Well, today the Supreme Court added 2 potentially landmark cases to this term's calendar. One is a dispute out of California. It focuses on a state law that requires pro-life crisis pregnancy centers to provide women with information about how they can obtain an abortion, often with the help of state funding. The second case involves a Minnesota state law banning political apparel from polling places, including things like buttons and T-shirts. Both decisions expected by the term's end next June. Coming up, we are getting new details tonight on President Trump's promised major announcement. We'll go live to Manila. And if you thought it's been a tough season so far for the NFL, maybe think again. Some of the biggest names are actually getting big praise, from Citizen of the Year to potential lifetime use of a private jet. We'll explain just ahead. President Trump is wrapping up his historic Asia trip by participating in the East Asia Summit in Manila on Tuesday. Upon his return to Washington on Wednesday, the president is promising a, quote, major statement on trade, North Korea, and he says a lot of other things. Chief White House correspondent John Roberts joins us live with that story. Hi, John.
Shannon, good afternoon to you from Manila here, where it's just turning now noon. The president's got about 3 hours of business left at the ASEAN summit. He's got lunch with all the leaders and then a 90-minute plenary session with them before he boards Air Force One and heads back to Washington, D.C. On Monday here in the Philippines, the president met with Rodrigo Duterte, the controversial president of the Philippines. The president received some criticism back at home for not publicly calling out Duterte for a rash of extrajudicial killings of drug users and drug dealers as part of a violent and aggressive crackdown on drugs here in the Philippines. But even though the president didn't call him out publicly, the U.S. and the Philippines did release a joint statement in which they underscored the need to protect human rights. As to how the two leaders got along, a spokesman for Duterte said it seemed like the chemistry was pretty good. Listen here.
Relationship appears to be very warm and very friendly. They've been very candid in their dealings, and it's very apparent that both of them have a person who they consider as not their best friend. They have similar feelings towards former U.S. President Barack Obama.
So the spokesman for Duterte saying they both share perhaps a distaste, if you will, for the former President Barack Obama. And remember, Duterte famously said something rather nasty about President Obama back in September of 2016. He did later apologize for it, though. The White House says that the president got a strong measure of support for from Duterte for the enforcement of United Nations sanctions against North Korea. He got a reaffirmation of the same thing in a trilateral meeting with Malcolm Turnbull, the Prime Minister of Australia, and Shinzo Abe of Japan. Back in Japan on the very first stop of the president's trip, Shinzo Abe came out and said he's 100% behind the president. Well, Monday here in the Philippines, he got the same measure of support from Malcolm Turnbull. Listen here.
We've got the same values and the same focus on ensuring that the North Korean regime comes to its senses and stops its reckless provocation and threats of conflict in our region. Peace and stability have underpinned the prosperity of billions of people over many decades, and we're going to work together to ensure we maintain it.
And Shannon, you mentioned that the president says he's got a big announcement coming up. He said Wednesday during that trilateral meeting. It could be a little later on in the week, likely something that will happen in the afternoon. He'll talk about progress that he made on North Korea in terms of getting solidarity among nations in the Pacific Rim to put the screws and put the squeeze on Pyongyang. And also, he said some good news about trade. He gave us a bit of a preview during that trilateral meeting. Listen here.
In addition to about $300 billion in sales to various companies, including China, that was $250 billion and going up very substantially from that. But we've made a lot of big progress on trade. We have deficits with almost everybody. Those deficits are going to be cut very quickly and very substantially.
Except us. We've got a surplus with us.
You're the only one.
Malcolm Turnbull only joking there because the United States does not run a trade deficit with Australia. In fact, we have a trade surplus of some $12 billion. And the president already looking forward to getting back home, tweeting not too long ago, quote, excited to be heading home to see the House pass a great tax bill with the middle class getting big tax cuts. So again, the president should be home probably by late tonight, I would think. No, wait a minute. I think tomorrow night. But, you know, doing the time
today we're
change
talking
here with
about.
as little sleep as we've got is a little difficult. But he will be getting home soon. Let's put it that way, Shannon.
All right, and we'll see you back here soon, too, as well. John Roberts, thank you so much. And joining me now, Niall Gardner, director of the Margaret Thatcher Center for Freedom at the Heritage Foundation. All right, Niall, good to see you tonight.
Great to see you, Shannon.
All right, we want to start with this. One of the president's recent tweets, because he's had a lot to say on this trip. He says, we'll be leaving the Philippines tomorrow after many days of constant meetings and work in order to #MAGA, make America great again. My promises are rapidly being fulfilled. Now, that's what he had to say. I want to play what Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer had to say on the Senate floor about how he thinks this trip went.
Without exaggeration, the President's trip to Asia has been one of the most embarrassing foreign trips a president has taken in my memory. It shows when it comes to foreign policy, President Trump is not ready for prime time.
How would you grade this trip?
Well, I think overall the president's done pretty well, actually. I think it's been a very successful foreign trip. It's been very well received. I think it's been a very powerful reaffirmation of American leadership on the world stage. And not really sure what Mr. Schumer was talking about there, but it does sound a little bit ridiculous, really. I do think that the president actually represented the United States very well on the world stage. And I think overall, if you look at his track record on foreign policy, President Trump has so far done very well. I mean, I would say a lot better than his predecessor, Barack Obama, who was obsessed with apologizing for America on the world stage and leading from behind. So I think you have a far tougher brand of American leadership right now, and that's a good thing.
Yeah, they definitely have a different strategy, the way that they approach foreign policy. What do you make of the president? Some say this dust-up over Russian President Vladimir Putin and the fact that he said, I believe when he says that they didn't interfere in our elections, that he believes it. Meaning he's saying that he believes Putin believes it when he's saying it to him. He got a lot of heat because he did go after some intelligence leaders and some within the community. Intel community felt like it was disrespectful. He's tried to clarify that sense. How do you think that's going to play out for him?
Yeah, I mean, firstly, without a shadow of a doubt, the Russians did attempt to interfere in the U.S. election, as they have attempted to do so all across the world, especially in Europe. And it's vitally important, I think, that the United States sends a clear message that this kind of interference in the U.S. presidential election system is completely unacceptable. I think certainly President Trump was trying to be sort of polite to Vladimir Putin, but let's be under no illusions here. Vladimir Putin is a ruthless despot who hates everything the United States stands for, and we simply cannot trust Vladimir Putin and his murderous Russian regime. And it's very important, I think, that the President of the United States does stand up to Vladimir Putin at every opportunity. After all, you know, American soldiers are on the front lines defending the Baltic states at the moment against the potential threat of a Russian invasion. And so the stakes are extremely high at this time. But let's be clear, I mean, the Russians are not our friends at this time.
Well, and here domestically, the president's already tweeting about this, talking about taxes and talking about the possibility of repealing Obamacare's individual mandate as part of the tax package. Here's what Vice President Pence told me when I asked him about that possibility last week. Any scenario in which the individual mandate under Obamacare is included, a repeal of that is included in this tax package?
I know it's under active consideration, and you know the president's determination to repeal Obamacare. We came close. We passed it out of the House of Representatives this year and came very close in the Senate, not once but twice. We're determined to come back to that issue next year, but I think the President and I are both interested in seeing the House and Senate consider the possibility of repealing the individual mandate tax as a part of this tax reform bill.
And quickly, he talked there about how they didn't get the Obamacare repeal done. How much pressure is there on them, on this president now who wants to talk about accomplishments, to get tax reform across the finish line?
I think there's tremendous pressure, and it's vital, I think, that you do have wide-ranging tax reform here in the United States. And it's significant that a lot of Asian countries at the moment are growing extremely rapidly with low tax rates, extremely low corporate tax rates. And the greater the level of economic freedom, the greater the level of economic prosperity. And so these tax reforms, I think, are fundamentally important for the long-term financial health of the United States. So I do wish the President all the best with his efforts this week. It's vital for the United States to maintain its position as the world's economic leader.
And for the GOP, too, if they want to prove to voters that they can get some of these big lifts done. Now, Gardner, good to see you.
Great to see you, Shannon.
Thanks for coming in. All right, coming up. Is all the bad publicity suddenly helping key NFL stars and maybe even their ratings? Well, Trace Gallagher digs into that. He investigates next. And the probe into the death of a Green Beret takes a new turn as we learn the Navy SEALs under investigation were already on the radar for another possible crime. NFL Commissioner Roger Goodell says there will be no changes aimed at blocking players from protesting the national anthem. And by the way, the player who started those anthem protests is in the headlines again. He's getting a big honor this time. Trace Gallagher is live to tell us more. Hey, Trace.
Hi, Shannon. GQ Magazine's Citizen of the Year story is titled "Colin Kaepernick Won't Be Silenced." That's a play on the fact that Kaepernick did not comment for the article and that he isn't commenting at all. GQ writes, quote, "As his public identity has begun to shift from football star to embattled activist, he has grown wise to the power of his silence. It has helped his story go round the world. It has even provoked the ire and ill temper of Donald Trump." Kaepernick, who is trying to get back into the NFL, has filed a grievance accusing NFL owners of colluding against him. The team say it's not about his anthem protest, it's about his diminishing skills as an NFL quarterback. There is no silence on behalf of rapper Jay-Z, who's continuing to use his tour to talk about injustices in America and NFL players protesting the anthem. Watch.
When people are kneeling and putting their fists up and doing what they're doing, it's not about a flag. It's about justice. It's about injustice. And that's not a black or white thing. It's a human issue. It's a human issue.
Meantime, NFL Commissioner Roger Goodell has been criticized for his handling of the anthem protest. Goodell says the league wants players to stand, but has stopped short of imposing a rule for players to do so. And now the commissioner has reportedly asked for a raise and a few perks. ESPN says Goodell wants $50 million a year. He makes $30 million now and wants use of a private jet for life and lifetime health insurance for his family. The NFL says the report is false, though it is true that Roger Goodell and Dallas Cowboys owner Jerry Jones are butting heads. Jones has threatened to sue the league if Goodell's new contract is finalized without approval from all NFL owners. But if Jones doesn't force Goodell out, a little-known NFL bylaw could force Jerry Jones out for conduct detrimental to the welfare of the league. Experts say that bylaw is a long shot, but it does exist. And finally, as for how fans are dealing with the protests and infighting, a Twitter account called Empty Seats Galore keeps posting pictures of stadiums around the league with thousands of empty seats. Yet Yahoo reports ticket sales for the year are up, though we should note television ratings for the year are down 5.5%. Shannon.
All right. Trace Gallagher live for us in L.A. Thank you. Well, 10 days after being assaulted at his home, Senator Rand Paul returned to Washington today. Police say the Kentucky senator's neighbor, Renee Bosher, attacked him, breaking half a dozen ribs and causing a fluid buildup around his lungs. Bosher has pleaded not guilty, and the motive for now remains a mystery. Senator Paul tweeted, "While I'm still in a good deal of pain, I will be returning to work in the Senate today, ready to fight for liberty and help move forward with tax cuts in the coming days and weeks." Well, there are reports that Staff Sergeant Logan Melgar, the Green Beret killed in Mali earlier this year, may have made a discovery that led to his murder. But the two Navy SEALs being investigated in Melgar's death argue they actually tried to save his life. National security correspondent Jennifer Griffin has been tracking this case and has the very latest details.
Shannon, we are learning the two SEALs, members of the elite SEAL Team 6, were already under suspicion prior to this mysterious death of the Green Beret. They were alleged to have been involved in skimming cash from an informant's fund that the team used as part of a secret counterterrorism mission in Mali. Staff Sergeant Logan Melgar, 34, was strangled to death at 5 a.m. on June 4th. The medical examiner ruled it homicide by asphyxiation. The two Navy SEALs at first reportedly said that Melgar had been drinking when they took him to the hospital. The problem is Staff Sergeant Melgar didn't drink, and he had told his wife Michelle that he was having trouble with these two SEALs in emails back home. Almost immediately, we are told, the superiors suspected foul play. Red flags were raised when the autopsy report came back and said that there was no sign of alcohol or drugs in Melgar's bloodstream. That's when the SEALs' alibi began to fall apart. Melgar was murdered at U.S. Embassy housing in Mali, in the capital, where he and the SEALs were staying. Their commander at AFRICOM headquarters in Stuttgart immediately ordered an investigation. Staff Sergeant Melgar was a highly regarded member of the Army's 3rd Special Forces Group. He was handpicked for the mission. The embassy staff and ambassador respected him. One of the SEALs is said to be a mixed martial arts specialist. NCIS, the Navy's Criminal Investigative Service, took over the investigation from the Army in September. Shannon?
Jennifer Griffin at the Pentagon, thank you. Well, coming up, ambushed and killed by terrorists, the deaths of 4 U.S. soldiers could be a wake-up call on American strategy in Africa. What are we doing there? More on that next. The 4 U.S. soldiers killed in Niger last month were working with local militias, partners in the war on terror, before they were ambushed. The Pentagon still searching for answers, sending a team to the remote village of Tongo Tongo over the weekend. 2 villagers reportedly told the Washington Post that the body of Sergeant David Johnson was, quote, found with his arms tied and a gaping wound at the back of his head. According to those villagers, suggests he may have been captured and then executed. Though the Pentagon will not confirm that, our next guest says that working with local militias in places like Niger could actually make a bad situation worse. Catherine Zimmerman with the American Enterprise Institute is here to explain. Good to see you tonight, Catherine.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, so there have been a lot of questions about what we're doing there, what our mission is there. I want to point to something that the New York Times editorial board, when this news was bubbling out, what they had to say about this. They said, what exactly is the true mission of American troops in Africa? American officials say their troops have a light footprint in Niger, but experts say local populations often view the foreign military presence in Africa, France is an even bigger operation, as heavy-handed, provoking a backlash against local and Western governments. Your take?
U.S. troops have 2 missions in Africa. One is the partner capacity building, which is what we were told these troops were doing. So building up the Nigerian capability to go after threats like ISIS and Al-Qaeda. The other is the counterterrorism mission, so going after the direct threats to the United States. We've seen that increase dramatically in Somalia. We've just seen some strikes elsewhere, and it's really a dual approach. But what's missing is the political side of this, where we're going in heavy with the military and going after these threats, but there's nothing that's coming in on the back end to stabilize the situation.
How can we handle that without people saying that we're getting involved in meddling in local politics, or that we're nation building in some way, overstepping the original mission?
It's certainly a challenge, and it's something that we need to be able to square, because as we're watching the conflicts disintegrate, we have a civil war in Libya, a civil war in Somalia, Mali is falling apart again, Nigeria is not stable, and it's all pressing on Niger as well. And unless we come in with the ability to build governance to help the governments address some of the grievances, we're going to see this insecurity. And from an American national security perspective, we cannot permit groups like Al-Qaeda and the Islamic State to have these footprints where they gain resources and fighters, and they can project force into Europe and eventually back into the United States itself.
How difficult is it for us when we do get involved in these places to be able to vet the local militias and different people? Sometimes picking sides there's really not a good alternative.
It's incredibly difficult, and we're asking our troops to do a lot with very few resources, and that's something that increases the risk. Commanders make those decisions on the ground, but it is something we need to be aware of, that they are being asked to put their lives at risk without much support, especially in Africa. One of the focuses has been the length of time it took for a response to the attack in Niger. But Africa is a huge continent, and the United States does not have a big footprint on the continent.
Yeah, we know that the FBI is there along with U.S. military investigators now, and these families and more broadly Americans really deserve answers about exactly what happened. So, Catherine, good to see you tonight. Thanks for coming in. All right, coming up, word from the DOJ that an investigation into Uranium One may be happening, but at least one Republican congressman says it's not good enough. He is not convinced. More on that coming up. Attorney General Jeff Sessions could be appointing a special counsel to investigate the sale of America's top uranium production to the Russians during the Obama administration. According to a Justice Department letter obtained by Fox News, the AG is directing federal prosecutors to look at certain aspects of the sale, which could include involvement by the Clinton Foundation. It's all very preliminary, but for some House Republicans who have been hammering the Attorney General for a special prosecutor, some think it's a step in the right direction. Some say not so fast. So should a special counsel be appointed based on what we know so far? Let's talk about it with Democratic strategist from Pine Street Strategies, Don Calloway, and Washington Times columnist and Fox News contributor Charlie Hurt. Gentlemen, welcome to you both.
Good to be with you.
Shannon.
Okay, so some of this letter that we got, let me read it so we know what we're talking about here. It says the Attorney General has directed senior federal prosecutors to evaluate certain issues raised in your letters. These were letters about why aren't you probing uranium-1 and fusion GPS. As you know, the department does not ordinarily confirm or deny investigations, and this letter should not be construed as doing so. So, Don, are people getting too excited about what may or may not be happening here?
Well, I don't know. I mean, obviously, DOJ actions such as this one are inherently political. If you are Hillary Clinton or Bill Clinton, the Clinton Foundation, you welcome this because you welcome it as an opportunity to show that you did no wrongdoing and you can exonerate yourself. There's no victory for anti-Clinton teams in a special investigation being called. There's victory in indictments and charges like we're seeing with the Mueller Russia special investigation. So the idea of a special investigation in itself is not an indictment or a statement of wrongdoing. It's a statement of just what it says, investigation. So if you're Hillary Clinton, you welcome this as an opportunity to show lay your hand bare and show that you had nothing to do with any wrongdoing with uranium-1.
Oh, Charlie's already chuckling. I can see it over here. But let me ask you, because listen, there are some Republicans who they look at this letter, and I tried to caution everybody. It doesn't say they're launching an investigation or there is a special prosecutor. Congressman Andy Biggs, a Republican we had on last week, he also says the same thing. He says we've been waiting for a response from the Justice Department since our first letter on July 27th. Tonight, we received a response that is encouraging but far from the decisive action we requested. We must have an unbiased, independent special counsel to investigate the matters we have raised. We have spent long enough on meaningless evaluations and empty promises. And I don't know if you guys saw the piece today by Congressman Jordan and Gates, who got together and said they listed thing after thing after thing that they want this Attorney General to investigate and say, why haven't you done it? Why aren't you doing your job? And tonight it sounds like they remain unconvinced.
Yeah. Well, no, I was chuckling because, of course, Don gave the explanation that an honest and honorable person would give in that situation. But we're talking about the Clintons, so it's not exactly that.
Am I going to have to referee?
And generally speaking, I'm absolutely against, and I agree that these things are inherently political, which is why, generally speaking, I'm opposed to these kinds of investigations. But we are coming after a time where we had the Obama administration had launched an investigation into the Trump campaign in the middle of a presidential campaign, and then now we have this zombie apocalypse investigation into the Trump supposed Russia ties with the Trump campaign that I think is completely boundless and pointless. I don't care. I think they should investigate everybody now. If we're going to have these kinds
including
of...
us?
And, well,
all three of us?
No, just mine.
Not everybody.
Maybe like Don, actually, because Don has that great answer that he can give.
Well,
I couldn't get away with that.
If you're innocent,
as I've learned from many years working in politics, no man can withstand a full investigation.
This is true.
Let's just lay
special
that back.
prosecutors often end up in places far from where they started. We've seen that.
They do, and they likely will. You know, we saw that with Watergate. We saw that with Bill Clinton and Monica Lewinsky. But the reality of the matter here is that Hillary Clinton, as the head of the Department of State, sat on the Council for Foreign Investment in the United States, which included 9 department heads. Is it reasonable to say that she convinced 9 secretaries, much like herself, equal to herself, to vote unanimously to approve the sale of uranium-1 to Rostrum? And from a substantive perspective, Rostrum purchased uranium-1 not for their American holdings, which do not produce uranium anymore, but for their Kazakh holdings, which is the largest producer of uranium. So both substantively and politically, procedurally, there's nothing here.
But you know there are a lot of questions about her husband at the time getting paid $500,000 for speeches that are in ways connected to these groups, and that raises questions.
What you say may be true, but that doesn't mean that there wasn't a shakedown by the Clinton Foundation.
Oh, okay.
9 secretaries. 9-0 was the vote.
We'll continue this during the commercial. That's pay-per-view, though. Stick around for Night Court and details on a hotel that is fit for the resistance. It is time now for Night Court. We pass no judgment on these stories, but present them to you, the jury, for your consideration. We're learning tonight that Planned Parenthood may be under federal investigation. That's according to the Hill news site. The FBI has asked the Senate for unredacted documents it obtained from abortion providers during its congressional investigation. The Hill says the move means that agents may be probing whether Planned Parenthood and other clinics illegally sold fetal tissue and body parts. And get ready for what's being built as the first leftist politically themed hotel. The Eaton Workshop Hotel opens next spring in Washington, surprise, and it will feature anti-Trump and other liberal messaging videos. There will be posters about upcoming protests in all the bedrooms, and a Hong Kong branch of the hotel is planning to replace Bibles with the UN Declaration of Human Rights. Coming to you right here in D.C. Well, thanks for joining us tonight. Most watched, most trusted, and most grateful that you spent the evening with us. There is much more news to come. It kicks off at 4 a.m. Eastern. Good night from Washington for now. I'm Shannon Bream.